Allendale and Manor Farm Shoot, a lovely little family shoot that we've kept going from 2008 through till this just last year, 2021. It's been a fantastic period, thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. Tim Mundy mentioned to all the guns at the last shoot that it would be a great idea to have some form of memento, an album of some sort. And looking back at the photographs that I had, I realised there are an awful lot, and there are an awful lot of good photographs, of which we'd never cram into a whole album, not on paper anyway. And so now that I've got high-speed broadband, thank goodness, in the countryside here, I thought I'd try and put something together that brought all of those pictures together and tried to encompass all of those years. We started it in 2007. Tim and I had a little walk round with some friends just over Allendale, and we shot a few birds, and we thought this was good. I'd just packed up my time at Berkshire Shoot running that, and I needed another challenge. So I plucked up courage to ask Caroline Graham whether we could use her ground as well, which she thankfully said yes. And we ran the first year, just a couple of days, and a few of us, but it was the embryo of better things to come. The real game changer was when Dominic and Miranda Armstrong moved into the manor. Now that meant that we could incorporate the water meadows into the fold. So that gave us 3 farms. It gave us Allendale farm of my dad's, which is about 60 acres. Caroline's Graham is around about 150, something like that. 60 acres over on the south side of the Lambourne Road, and about another 120 odd plus on the north side, and then slap back in the middle is the River Lambourne and the water meadows. And of course, once we could incorporate that, we had a big shoot on our hands. Now, the problem that we always had with Allendale Shoot was that we didn't have any game covers. We only had hedgerows, apart from the water meadows, and that meant we were a bit restricted, and we were mainly a partridge shoot most of the time. We had to shoot it early and shoot it hard, because by the first couple of frosts the hedgerows are all gone. We had no game cover, and so the birds would dissipate to warmer places. Thankfully, we had the water meadows that held the pheasants quite well, but that was the challenge, which made it kind of almost more fun, if not stressful at times. But we started to put down birds, and we put down birds in 2009, and we had quite a good return on that. But by 2011, we were having 50 bird days, and quite regularly. You know, we'd have maybe sort of 30, 40, 50 bird days at the start of the season, and then it would taper off into December, and then it was done really, apart from a few walk round days in January. We excelled on one particular day in 2014, I think it was, and shot 69. I think if you'd had a day when all the drives came together at the same time, we'd have easily cracked 100 without a doubt, and that we'd have done it, but we never managed that. And as far as percentage-wise concerned, we always did, on one particular species, above 50%. And indeed, according to my notes, in 2014-15, we actually shot 106% of our pheasants. So we were dragging them in from elsewhere. So for a small little family shoot, it has been brilliant. So I'm going to take you through all the drives on this. I'm going to try and do some voiceovers on bits and pieces, give a bit of background. There's a lot of faces in there that we've seen. There's some we haven't, some that are sadly no longer with us, and some that are very poorly at the moment. And you know, I think it's fitting that we've got them included in there, and you'll spot them somewhere along the line. So here's my little video. I hope you like it. Feeding the birds was always a job I enjoyed, and in the early days I used to put in aniseed and bird puller and the like, but that tailed off after a little while. But to get the family involved with it, to go around topping up the hoppers and feeding on the ground was wonderful fun. And those pictures of us that winter in the snow, that was quite something special actually. And I remember we got over to the large field of Carolines and looked back across to Allendale, and we counted 21 hares on the field opposite. Quite staggering. Great fun. And we put down about 4 to 5 tons a year. So we were feeding not only our birds but a lot of wild ones as well. So we felt like we were putting something back. The start of shoot day has always been one of excitement for me. Certainly in the early days when we were doing it from the Mallards when we lived there, and it was a bit fraught. There was always tensions in the Carter household, but we got the job done. We got the drinks out. We got the sausage rolls on. Everybody came along, and it was a great start to the day. You know, we had a little tipple, a slow gin, a report, good natter, and then we had the safety brief, and the ultimate safety brief from the safety briefer of safety briefers. You know, can't better Mr. Tim Mundy for that. He excelled. And then, of course, Louise and I moved down to Dorset, and the mantle was taken on by Sarah and Chris Horden. And thank you so much for you two for doing that, because you carried on that automatically, that same ethos, that same sort of atmosphere, that we're all there to have a great day. And pretty much every time we certainly did. So the start of the day, most important for a good shoot day. Over the road drive, it only came about because again, Dominic and Miranda came along. We didn't need the rough square in the top corner any longer, and so it was Dominic's idea to start pushing them across the road. And I seem to remember many years ago driving back along the B4000 Shefford and actually seeing the guns from a previous shoot stood out there. So I had a feeling that it would work, and boy did it ever. When it worked, it was an amazing drive, and it took a lot of effort from the beaters. There was a lot of walking. We had to get right round the back of the birds, and the likes of Charlotte and Lindsay, I'll never forget them. You know, they go right round the other side and run all the way down the hill. And the key was, in the end, we worked out the key was to do it fast, as far as getting right round the outside of all the birds, and then really starting to push them over. And I used to shout so loud, I don't know if the guns ever heard me, but I used to shout so loud on that first drive that quite often I've completely lost my voice. But my God, when we got the birds over the road, that was a pretty spectacular drive. The first part of the water meadows has been transformed over the years from when we first started, because Dominic and Miranda put in so many trees, and the last couple of years it's really borne fruit. This first half, it was like the rest of the water meadows. We could get the birds in there. My goodness, it was difficult to get them to fly, but quite often when they did fly, they flew really well. It was a fun drive. It always produced something, but it was one of those, like the other half of the water meadows, you always felt it was left a little bit wanting. And if we were going to have a bad day, then it was either that part of the water meadows or the second part that generally let us down. But it's a big bit of ground, and it held birds, and it gave us more. Kelvin's Hedge. Well, Kelvin's Hedge is named after one of the beaters, Kelvin, and in those days we used to walk up Kelvin's Hedge to try and get to the game cover at the top of the hill. It never really worked, unfortunately, the game cover up there. It was really nice to have, but it was right on the edge of the ground, and we always had to try and walk round it. But on this particular day, Kelvin had a massive heart attack. He was airlifted by the air ambulance off from the grain store, and believe it or not, he was back 2 weeks later beating again. It was quite incredible. But it was never really meant to be a drive. It changed once we gained the water meadows when Dominic and Miranda arrived. And I remember that I used to take my binoculars with me walking the dogs every morning. And there was one day I was stood watching up Kelvin's Hedge basically, and I could see all the pheasants wandering up the hill. And I thought, well, actually, if we put a few feeders up there, then we might get something out of it, which is what we did. And we drew the birds up there, and we managed to, by getting up and around it, push it downhill back onto the water meadows. So that was effectively pushing the birds back home, which was always a good thing. And we got some sport out of it. It always did well early on, like all of our drives, when there was game cover. Not game cover, but there was cover there. And it tapered out around about November, December, and then there was nothing there, and we had to leave it alone and not bother with it. But it was a great drive. So that's Kelvin's Hedge. Lunchtime has evolved over the years. In the early days, my mother she would make sausage rolls and we'd have them at Allendale. And they were lovely times and some great memories there. More recently, we generally packed up and finished around Black Barn, and there were some great times, especially at the end when Dave brought out his table so that we could all put stuff on there. It added a bit of decorum to the procedure. But lunchtime was quite a special moment, and the same when we had Dominic and Miranda's day. That was fantastic. If we went back up to the manor and had all sorts of soups and sausage rolls up there, and that used to remind me of the effort that Mum used to put in, and that was very touching. So I thoroughly enjoyed lunches. I think everybody did. A few beers, a few wines, well, not so much wine, but maybe slow gin, and then we'd be getting ready for Allendale. And when the guns disappeared off around the corner, us beaters were left there, and we generally took a photograph and stood around in the cold, kicking our heels, waiting to get ready to move off and try and produce some birds over Allendale. When my mother passed away, she was only 67, too young, and she was a part of the shoot. She was doing the lunches for us in the early days. She loved doing it. She loved the company. She loved being part of it, and she came out beating a couple of times. And she went far too young, but you guys all did me a great service and my family a great service with the wonderful salute that we did that day, and I watched it over and over and over again, and here it is, unashamedly, here it is again. The Allendale Drive was, along with Over the Road, one of the two iconic drives we had on the shoot. Both of those would sit anywhere on any shoot anywhere in the country. When they worked, they were stunning. The birds at Allendale sometimes flew as well as I've seen anywhere, and if we got it all set up, which took a lot of doing, because it was a lot of hanging around for the beaters, sometimes in cold, wet, windy conditions, whilst the guns got in position. But if it worked, then it was great. It was lovely beating. We couldn't actually see what was going on, but the actual proof of the pudding was to hear the bang, 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 bang. You know, you could really hear that there was stuff going overhead. And when you got to the end, it didn't really matter whether the guns had shot 1 or they'd shot 20. It just didn't matter that you knew they had shooting, and they had some brilliant shooting. And it was not only the partridge as well, it was the pheasants too. The pheasants flew fantastic there at times. And quite often, a couple of times, a bird would be hit on the Allendale Drive, and it would probably end up right the way down by the road, down in the garden at Allendale, which is a long, long way away, just to show you how far those birds could travel. And I think that's the one thing that I'm most proud of, is working out how that drive could work, and when it worked, it was very satisfying. The second part of the Water Meadows was definitely a challenge. The density of the cover was just too much, really. We did manage to get birds out. We could never get them to fly as well as we'd hoped, I don't think, if we really were honest with it. But it did give us another option. It was a big bit of ground, and everybody worked very hard. I think the proof of the pudding was probably on Dominic's day, when we had an absolute dearth of beaters, because if you had plenty of beaters, and let's face it, my optimum was, my minimum was 9 beaters, and we pretty much get round doing all the partridges that way, but you'd never cover the Water Meadows with 9. You needed an army, and if you had an army, then you could put the birds up. But it was another option. It held the birds, and when we could get to them and we could put them up, they either flew or they didn't. When they did fly, they were great. Anyway, that was the second part of the Water Meadows. And of course, if we didn't do very well, then we always had the option that we could quickly do Over the Road again and get something else, which we quite often did if we had the stamina and the strength. So that's the second part of the Water Meadows. Going home at the end of the day, it was always a funny old time. It was a lovely feeling when we'd had a great day, and you'd heard a lot of shooting going on. Didn't matter about the size of the bags, you just knew that everybody had had a good day shooting. All the beaters had worked hard, and it was great fun. And most of the beaters were just happy to be going home, because they were walking between 4 and 5 miles a day. We didn't ferry it. Certainly in the latter stages, we didn't ferry the beaters about. We walked every inch of it. So it was fishing up the day was good. It was a good feeling most of the time. The end of season do's, we had a few really good ones, and a lot of the time, many thanks to Dominic and Miranda, because they often paid the majority of it. And we went to most of the pubs in the area. We started off by going to the Plough at Eastbury. We did a number of years at the Tally Ho, and then we did 1 year we did a couple of years at the Swan, the Great Shepherd, or the Great Shepherd as it is now. And of course, we had some unbelievable days at Dominic and Miranda's after Dominic's shoot, and some of which And I thoroughly disgraced myself out, no doubt. Had one or too many to drink, as one does. And it was, they were days to savour. If you were there, you know what I mean. This piece can't go without talking about the beaters for a minute. They were fantastic over the years, and it's so good to see the pictures of the kids when they were young and started off beating, and then they've grown into maturity, and young women and young men, and they always gave their best in many ways. Some of them were a bit lax at times, but they all did it, and they all helped out, and they all learned something from it. And sometimes I tore the last vestige of hair out of my head getting things done, but on the whole they always came up with the goods at the end of the day, and the birds would not have been over the guns without those guys. And I can only thank them wholeheartedly for all their efforts, and I think that sentiment would be shared by you guns, I'm sure, that are watching this now.